Hello everyone. So tonight I'm doing Extreme on Unit 4 Practice FRQ for AP Psychology for Fiveable. If you're new to Fiveable, welcome. And if this is your first stream, hello and welcome as well. Alright, so don't forget to follow @ThinkFiveable on Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube so you can stay updated about new streams and new changes to Fiveable and what's going on. Alright, so in this stream, we're going to cover what is an FRQ, because within Fiveable, like the AP Psychology department, for the last couple of weeks, we've been having like FRQ practices for each unit. So for new people, I'm just going to go over the basics again. So like what an FRQ is, how to write an FRQ, and then in the end, we're going to do the practice FRQ. That's just the basic routine that we do. What is an FRQ? How to write one, and then in the end, we have a practice for Unit 4 of Psychology today. Okay, so just some background. All right, so just some background about an FRQ. Okay, so I think there was a glitch, sorry. Okay, so an FRQ stands for a free response question. And if you've taken an AP test in the past, you might have already done an FRQ before, like any other type of social science course or a history course. So for AP Psychology, the FRQ is worth 33.3% of the overall exam score. So it is very, very important that you do well on the FRQ, because if you do well on the multiple choice but not very well on the FRQ, your score could be brought down a lot just because you didn't do well on the FRQ. Because remember, it's 33%, so that does affect your overall score. It could be a difference between a 4 and a 5 or a 4 and a 3. So you really want to make sure that you understand how to write an FRQ and etc. All right, so the FRQ contains 7 parts, and remember, an FRQ is not an essay. You don't need an introduction. You don't need a thesis. You don't need a conclusion. You really just need to answer the questions and apply them within the given prompt. This is not AP Lang or AP Literature. You do not have to write an essay when explaining your answers, so don't waste time doing that. And also remember that you only have 50 minutes to answer the FRQ. So you don't want to spend too much time on one of them, and you don't want to spend too much time on one part. What I like to do anytime I take a standardized test is carry a watch, because it really helps me see how much time I have left, and it really helps me with my time management. So just remember that. Pace accordingly, and don't spend too much time on one part of the FRQ for AP Psychology. All right, so now how to write an FRQ. So does anyone know how to write an FRQ, or think they know how to write an FRQ? Like how would you approach it if you've taken an AP course before? If anybody wants to comment. Okay, so I'm going to go over the do's and don'ts of what to do on the AP Psychology FRQ. So first of all, these are the things that you do want to do when writing an FRQ. So firstly, you want to write with a pen. It's just a requirement by the College Board for the AP Psychology. You have to write in either a blue or black ballpoint ink pen. So yes, don't forget the pen. Write with a pen. And if you make a mistake, completely okay. Just cross out a line through the mistake. Don't scribble or cause too much of a mess. Just put a straight line through the mistake that you made and continue to write. Also, you want to write incomplete sentences. Earlier, I did say that it's not an essay, but you still want to have clear thoughts when answering the question. You don't want to confuse the grader, because that might affect your score. So you want to write incomplete sentences so that the grader knows what you're trying to say, and that your answer is clearly demonstrated in the response. Also, you want to respond to the prompt in order. So you want to start from the first part or the first question to the last part or the last question, because once again, it'll probably make your grader happier, because if they don't like the order that you're in, it may affect your score just because they're aggravated at that point. So just make sure that you go in order to make it easier for the grader to grade your FRQ. And it also just helps you keep in order of the questions that you've answered and the questions that you've not answered. Because if you skip one, you may forget to go back and answer that part. So also going in order just helps you to keep track of what you've done and what you haven't done. So it's really best to go in order. And also skip a line after each question. And I meant like after each response to the questions. You want to skip a line because once again, it just helps with keeping your answers clear and organized, making it easier for the grader and also yourself. So when you go back and check, you can make sure you've answered each part by skipping a line and having that clear organization. Just trust me, it makes it so much better when you're organized when writing the FRQ. Also, if anyone has any questions with anything, just drop a comment. I'm looking at the chat, so if you have a question, just feel free to ask. Okay, so now I'm going to go over what not to do on the AP Psychology FRQ. Firstly, do not write a conclusion or introduction. Like I said in the beginning, it is not an essay. You just want to answer the prompt and apply the situations. You do not want to write an essay. And once again, do not spend too much time on items you are unsure about. You only have 50 minutes to answer 2 FRQs, so just move on. And if you have time for the question that you don't know, come back to them. But do not spend too much time because, trust me, those 50 minutes go by so fast. So you want to pace yourself accordingly. And like I mentioned before, having a watch really helps out with that process. So yes, do not spend too much time on one part. Okay, so now we're going to go into how to write an FRQ and the steps to write an amazing FRQ. So here's a little acronym that you can remember. So remember IDA, IDA, or however you want to say it, IDA or IDA. So the I stands for identify, and that means to identify topics and concepts within the question. D, define. Define vocabulary words in the question and form definitions. Lastly, A, apply. Don't just define the word. Explain with further analysis why it works. Apply the term to the given situation. So this is how you want to answer an FRQ. And we will be using IDA in the FRQ in the end, but this is just the overall steps. Does anyone have any questions about this so far? So what you would do is you would read the question, and within the question, you would identify topics and concepts. So the question may say something about structuralism or about a biological system in the brain or something. So you want to make sure you identify those topics and concepts. That's the first part. And then once you see that, you want to define the vocabulary words in the questions and form definitions. So a question may ask you about hypothalamus, so define it. And then lastly, you want to apply the word. So hypothalamus, they may ask you they may give you a scenario. So you want to define it and then apply the word you define within the scenario given in the question. It may seem a little confusing now, but trust me, it's so much easier when you actually see the FRQ. So once we actually get to the FRQ, it'll probably be much better. But if not, if anybody needs help with that part right now, just let me know and I can explain it again. But yeah, that's basically it. Identify, define, and apply. If you follow those 3 steps when writing the FRQ for the AP Psychology exam, you will do well in the FRQ. Well, also you can make sure that you define the words correctly. But yes, if you follow this and you have the correct words defined and you identify the right concepts and topics, this is the perfect formula to score well on the AP Psychology FRQ. All right, so how can I be successful on the FRQ? Well, this is how you can be successful on the FRQ. Make sure you know the content, which seems like an obvious statement, but really, there will be concepts and topics on the FRQ that you're like, I remember learning that, but I just can't remember what that was or what that means. So make sure you really, really drill yourself on the content. What I did is I bought like a really big stack of flashcards with like all the concepts and definitions within AP Psychology, and I broke them up over the course of a week, and I just drilled myself on those flashcards. So I made sure that I knew every single definition, every single term that could be tested on the AP Psychology exam. So yes, make sure you know the content. So not only the definitions, but theories and and important people within psychology. So yeah, know all that stuff. And know your vocabulary. Yeah, like I said, key theories and key concepts are very, very important to know to be successful on the AP Psychology FRQ. Okay, so this is Unit 4, right? And Unit 4 is about conditioning and sorts. So 2 very, very important people that you want to make sure you are familiar with for Unit 4 of AP Psychology include B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov. And B.F. Skinner is known for operant conditioning and the Skinner box and shaping, whereas Ivan Pavlov is known for classical conditioning. All right, so now we're going to go into the differences of classical conditioning versus operant conditioning, just so we can answer these FRQs to the best of our ability, just to give a little background of what the 2 are. So does anyone know what classical conditioning is, or operant with either one? If you want to provide an answer in the chat of how you would define them, or any key concepts or any key things about the 2 types of conditioning, or a key difference, just let me know if you have anything to say about that. But if not, I'll just move on and I can just explain the 2, but I give anyone a few seconds. Okay, so Lena says classical uses association and operant uses reward and punishment. That is absolutely correct. That is a very key difference between the 2. So classical conditioning, it associates between 2 different stimuli and no behavior is involved. The first stimulus encounter is called the unconditioned stimulus. And an unconditioned stimulus produces a response without any previous learning. For example, like an unconditioned stimulus could be food for like a dog. And the response would be salivation, and that is a response that occurs without any type of learning. Like it just happens because of that. It's just a response from the unconditioned stimulus. And that response is called an unconditioned response. So the response to the unconditioned stimulus is known as the unconditioned response. And then operant conditioning involves changing voluntary behaviors. And then behavior response is followed by either a reinforcement or a punishment, or also reward. So a reward, punishment, reinforcement, or punishment. And then reinforcements cause behaviors to increase. So reinforcements positively impact behavior. But, I forgot to mention, but a punishment will cause a behavior to decrease, so negatively impacts behavior. All right, so here is the difference, just an image that really shows the difference between classical versus operant conditioning. So here for classical conditioning, we see a dog, we see a bell, and we see food, and it says associate an involuntary response and a stimulus. So associating a bell with food is basically what this image is trying to show, and the salivation of the dog. Whereas operant conditioning associates a voluntary behavior and a consequence. So like if you're familiar with the Skinner box, you know that there was a lever that a mice could push down to get food, and if they were going in the right direction, they would press a button and the food would come out like it's shown there. But if they hit the wrong button or going in the wrong direction, they would be shocked. And that shock was the shock was the punishment, and the receival of the food was the reinforcement. All right, and here's just another picture, another diagram to explain classical conditioning, because this is one that students have the most trouble with because there's so many terms and everything. So this just helps. This image really clears up the whole thing. Okay, so in the before conditioning part, we have the unconditioned stimulus, which is the food, and then the unconditioned response is the salivation. So the dog sees food and the dog salivates. Unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. And then a neutral stimulus is introduced. In this case, the neutral stimulus is a whistle. The dog hears the whistle, but really has no response yet because there's no association between the 2 yet before conditioning. So the dog hears the whistle and is confused, but during conditioning, a whistle is blown, and every time the whistle is blown, there is food. So then the dog salivates. So then after conditioning, because these two were associated, because the whistle and the food were associated, just the whistle, the neutral stimulus actually becomes a conditioned stimulus. So then the dog will salivate just by hearing the sound of the whistle. So then that becomes a conditioned response because they've been conditioned to salivate due to the conditioned stimulus of hearing a whistle. Does that make sense to anyone or to everyone? Or do we explain that again? But it's going to come back in the FRQ, but that's basically the general of it. So you have an unconditioned stimulus, an unconditioned response, and then you have a neutral stimulus. The neutral stimulus at first creates no response, but when the neutral stimulus is paired with the unconditioned stimulus, and then the neutral stimulus turns into the conditioned stimulus, creating a conditioned response. So that's basically it. Like if you see the flow of this, like food, no food response. I'm confused. Why are you blowing the whistle? Oh, okay, I see food and I see a whistle. So that means every time I hear the whistle, there should be food. So I'm going to salivate. And that's basically the whole process here. Okay, so now we're going to go over some operant conditioning methods. So methods of reinforcement include positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And then methods of punishment include positive punishment and negative punishment. And remember, negative does not equal bad. The most important part is the reinforcement or the punishment part. Negative just says if you're taking away something. And then positive means you're giving something. So remember, positive doesn't always mean good, because I'll explain that now. Because a negative punishment would be taking away something that the object enjoyed. So like taking away from a person, because that is the cell phone, the stimulus that they enjoyed, and taking away is the negative part. So that's the negative punishment. Whereas a positive punishment is giving an undesirable stimulus. So giving something that the person is not going to enjoy, or the organism. So for example, giving a child more chores would be a positive punishment. And then for reinforcement, a positive reinforcement may be giving a child more TV time after they do their homework. And a negative reinforcement would be like not making them eat broccoli because they got an A on a test or something. So taking away taking away something that they don't like as a form of reward, if that makes sense. And also here, like the image, here are their examples. So positive reinforcement, a positive behavior followed by positive consequences. So manager praises the employee. A negative reinforcement would be positive behavior followed by a removal of negative consequences. So manager stops nagging the employee. So they're taking away something, but it's a positive because they're taking away something that they don't like. And then a punishment is negative behavior followed by negative consequences. So like a manager demotes the employee. Okay, so now we're actually going to get into the FRQ practice. But does anyone have any questions about operant conditioning or classical conditioning, or any of the methods before we actually start the practice FRQ? If not, I'll just continue to move on and we'll start the practice FRQ. Hopefully this background will help you guys to answer the FRQ better, for a better practice. Okay, so if there's no questions, if there is, just interrupt me when I'm reading the FRQ. But if not, I will just go ahead and continue to read the FRQ. Okay, so Tobias and Sophie are parents who want to use learning principles to help their teenagers learn responsibility. Specifically, they would like their teens to do their laundry by themselves at least once a week. Explain whether or not you would recommend Tobias and Sophie to use the following learning principles to accomplish their goal. If you think they should use the principle, explain how. If you think they should not use the principle, explain why not. Okay, so that's the question. And remember, identify. So what can you identify within this question? What are some keywords? Oh, I forgot the bullet points. All right, so the first bullet point is classical conditioning. Then we have positive reinforcement. Then there is positive punishment. And then there is shaping. So you remember IDA and use this to identify any key concepts or terms within the question. But then they're also asking us to explain these principles. So first, remember that we identify these 4 principles they're asking us to define: classical conditioning, positive reinforcement, positive punishment, and shaping. So now what is the next step to answer the FRQ? Well, the next step, remember, is D, define. So then we have to define each of these 4 bullets, or each of these 4 concepts or 4 principles. And then lastly, we will apply them to the situation and answer the question by saying if they should use the principle and if they should not use the principle to help their children or to help their teenagers do the laundry by themselves at least once a week. Okay. Oh, and I forgot another last bullet, observational learning. So that's a 5th one that we're going to have to define and apply to the situation provided in the question. Okay, so first, what is classical conditioning? So we just had some more slides about this in the beginning. So because of that background, you guys should be able to answer this question. So what is classical conditioning? So if anyone wants to comment in the chat below, just a definition of classical conditioning. If you know it, if not, I'll go back to the slide about it and explain it again. So remember, classical conditioning is when 2 different stimuli are associated. And remember this slide of classical conditioning showing how before conditioning, there's an unconditioned stimulus that creates an unconditioned response. There's a neutral stimulus that creates no response at first, but then when the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus are paired, it creates the unconditioned response. So therefore, after conditioning, the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus, which creates a conditioned response. So how do we put that in words? Let's go back to the next slide and see the definition of classical conditioning. So I think it's like a glitch in this slide, why it keeps repeating these bullets. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what's the problem. Okay. So what is classical conditioning? Classical conditioning is the process of repeatedly pairing an original unconditioned stimulus, which was food in the image that I just showed you, with which naturally produces an unconditioned response, the salivation, with a neutral stimulus, which was the whistle, such that a new stimulus produces the same response. So that the neutral stimulus, the whistle, produces the unconditional response of salivation. But that is how it would be defined using words on the AP exam. Okay, so should Tobias and Sophie use classical conditioning in order to teach their teenagers or to get their teenagers to do the laundry at least once a week? What do you guys think? Do you think they should use classical conditioning or not? Explain your reasoning if you do believe so, and explain your reasoning if you don't believe they should use it. I'll give you guys a few moments to answer that, and then I'll go over the answer. Okay, so no. Sophie and Tobias should not use classical conditioning. Because remember, in order to use classical conditioning, Tobias and Sophie would have difficulty finding an unconditioned stimuli that results in room-cleaning behavior. So imagine, like, you can continue to blow a whistle, and the teenagers are not going to correlate the whistle between between doing their laundry. It's not going to work that way. Because remember, going back to the other slide, with classical conditioning, no behavior is involved. So it's pretty pointless to try to use classical conditioning because they want them to do their laundry by themselves, which is a behavior. So classical conditioning is not that beneficial for this situation. Okay, so yeah, we said no. No using classical conditioning. Okay, so we did it. Congratulations, we did it. We identified the term classical conditioning. We defined the term. The definition is here. And then we applied it to the laundry situation by saying no, they should not use it because they would not be able to find an unconditioned stimuli, and there's no behavior involved in there's a behavior involved in the situation, and there's no behavior involved in classical conditioning. Therefore, it would not be beneficial to use classical conditioning in this way. So no. So like as a full final answer, you could say something like this. Classical conditioning is the process of repeatedly pairing an original unconditioned stimulus which naturally produces an unconditioned response with a new neutral stimulus such that the new stimulus produces the same response. No, they should not use classical conditioning. In order to use classical conditioning, Tobias and Sophie would have difficulty finding an unconditioned stimuli that will result in the laundry, and they're doing their laundry. So on the AP exam, if you answer the question like this, that would be full credit because you identified the term, you define the term, and then you apply it to the situation. So congratulations, the first bullet is done. Okay, next. So the next bullet was about positive reinforcement. So let's define positive reinforcement. So what is positive reinforcement? I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that and define positive reinforcement. Remember the last few slides we did about positive reinforcement, or the last slides we did about operant conditioning. So if you have a definition, just drop it below about what you think the definition is. I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that. Okay. So, positive reinforcement is an added stimulus that strengthens a response. Added stimulus, that's the most important part. You're adding something to increase the chance of the behavior to occur again. So, should Tobias and Sophie use positive reinforcement? Oops, I was gonna let you guys think. So what do you guys think? Should I use positive reinforcement or not? I'll give you a few moments to answer that. Well, what you think? Okay, so I don't see any comments in the chat, so I'll go ahead and reveal the answer. Yes. They should use positive reinforcement. And the reason why is that positive reinforcement can increase the chances that their teens actually do their laundry. So Tobias and Sophie can provide their teens, that is a typo, can provide their teens some stimulus to encourage them to do laundry on their own in the future. So does anyone want to give an example of a positive reinforcement they could use in the situation? Like what is something they could add? Like what is a stimulus they could add or give the teens to strengthen a response and them doing the laundry on their own? Have any ideas? Just let me know. This will help you sort of check to make sure you know what a positive reinforcement is and can come up with an example. So I'll give you guys a few moments to take a guess. And if there's no response, I'll just go ahead and reveal the final answer. Okay, so here's the example answer. Positive reinforcement is an added stimulus that strengthens a response. Yes, they should use positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement can increase the chances that their teens do their laundry. Tobias and Sophie can provide their stimulus to do their own laundry in the future. For example, as a form of positive reinforcement, they could give their teens money each time they do their laundry. So, yes, that is an example answer. if you answer the question in that way on the exam, that would be full credit. So we identified it once again, positive reinforcement, we defined it, then we applied it to the situation with Tobias and Sophie and their teenagers. Okay, so what is positive punishment? So I'll give you guys a few seconds to define it in your own terms, in your own words, and if not, I'll just go ahead and reveal the answers. So time starts now. Okay, so positive punishment is an attempt to decrease an undesirable behavior by introducing an unfavorable outcome. So positive punishment tries to adjust incorrect behaviors or tries to adjust undesired behaviors to shift them to a desired behavior. So if the desired behavior is not seen, something may be provided, something may be added that produces an unfavorable outcome. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, so should Tobias and Sophie use positive punishment to get their children to do their own laundry? Remember, the goal is doing their laundry by themselves at least once a week. So would using positive punishment be beneficial in achieving this overall goal? What do you guys think? Okay, no. They should not use positive punishment. Positive punishment is effective in making an organism avoid a behavior rather than actually doing a behavior. So in this case, Tobias and Sophie are not trying to get their teens to avoid doing their laundry. They're not trying to get their teens to avoid a certain behavior. They want their teens to do a certain behavior. And a positive punishment helps to avoid behaviors. So therefore, it's not really beneficial to use positive punishment in this situation because they want their teens to do a behavior. So no. And then an example answer would be, positive punishment is an attempt to decrease an undesirable behavior by introducing an unfavorable outcome. No, they should not. Positive punishment is effective in making an organism avoid a behavior rather than doing a behavior. So if they use positive punishment, it would just discourage their teenagers from wanting to do the laundry. So if you answer the question in that way on the AP exam using IDA, that would be full credit. So congratulations. We did it again. So we're 2 bullets down or 3 bullets down? I can't remember. I think we're on the 4th bullet now. So let's go ahead and go to the 4th bullet. Okay, so what is shaping? Shaping is a behavioral term that refers to gradually molding or training an organism to perform a specific response behavior by reinforcing any responses that are similar to the desired response. Okay, so first part is down. We identified and we defined. So now let's apply. So do you think Tobias and Sophie should use shaping now that you know the definition of shaping? What do you guys think? Give you guys a few seconds to answer, and if not, I'll go ahead and reveal the answer. Okay, so yes, they should use shaping because at first the teenagers might receive positive reinforcement for putting their clothes in the hamper to be washed, then only receiving it after putting the clothes from the hamper in the washing machine, and so on. So basically, shaping is just molding or training an organism to perform a specific response by reinforcing any responses that are similar to the desired response. So in my answer, I said putting clothes in the hamper. We're getting a little closer to the desired response. Now we're putting the clothes from the hamper in the washing machine. So we're getting even closer to the desired response. And the desired response, remember, is to get them to do laundry on their own. So basically, they're inching up to that final goal. They're putting them in the hamper. They're putting clothes in the hamper in the washing machine. And then finally, they'll start the washing machine, and then they've done their laundry and fold it, etc., so on. So we're getting we're inching up to the desired goal. That is shaping. So an example answer would be, shaping refers to the gradual molding or training an organism to perform a specific response behavior by reinforcing any responses that are similar to the desired response. So that is key. So anytime you see shaping, remember, reinforcing any responses that are similar to the desired response. That will help you each time, every time you see shaping. Okay, so yes, Tobias and Sophie should use shaping. At first, the teenagers might receive positive punishment for putting their clothes in the hamper to be washed, then only receiving it after putting the clothes from the hamper in the washing machine, and so on, to achieve the overall goal of getting the teenagers to do their own laundry at least once a week. And if you answer the question in that way, once again, that will be full credit on the AP exam. So congratulations, we answered the fourth bullet of the FRQ. So now I believe we have one more bullet to answer, and that is observational learning. Okay, so what is observational learning? And I should have put Bandura in the beginning slides as well when I put B.F. Skinner and Pavlov, because Bandura is also someone who is very important in this unit and someone whose name you should recognize, and you should also know their work, like the Bobo doll experiment, when children saw adults beating up a big Bobo doll, and then the children were then allowed to go into the room, and then they repeated the same behavior that the adults did. So I sort of gave away the answer with that response. But yeah, so think about that and define observational learning. I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that, and then I'll reveal the answer. Okay, so observational learning is learning that happens indirectly through a process of watching others and then imitating their behavior, like I mentioned with the Bobo doll experiment. The children were in a room, there was adults hitting on a doll, and the children were just there watching the adults hit on this doll. And then the adults left the room, the children were allowed to go into the room, and their behavior was observed, and guess what? The children repeated the behavior they saw the adults do. They started beating on the doll like the adults did. So they learned, their behavior was learned indirectly through a process of watching others, the adults, and imitating their behavior. So, should Tobias and Sophie use observational learning, also known as modeling? So I put in parentheses because you may see modeling, observational learning, they're very similar, or the same thing, just two different ways of being expressed. So, do you think that they should use this concept in order to teach their children, or in order to get their teenagers to do the laundry on their own? So what do you guys think? All right, so yes, they should use observational learning. And here's why. If Tobias and Sophie model the behaviors they want imitated to their teenagers, it could actually encourage their teenagers to do their laundry. So if they see their parents always doing their own laundry, and then they hear their parents talking about how great it is to do your own laundry and how amazing it makes you as a person, etc., they may see that as like, okay, well, yeah, my parents do it. They say all these good things about it. They are encouraging me to do my own laundry. So yes, that could actually help Tobias and Sophie to get their children to do their laundry. So a final example answer that would be acceptable on the AP exam would be, observational learning is learning that happens indirectly through a process of watching others and then imitating their behavior. Tobias and Sophie should use observational learning. If Tobias and Sophie model the behaviors they want imitated, it could encourage their teenagers to do their own laundry. So if you answered it in that way on the AP exam, you are correct. And that is full credit once again. Alright, so now we're going to get into the next part of the FRQ. So it's the same question. Tobias and Sophie are parents. They want to use learning principles to help their teens learn responsibility. They want their teens to do their laundry by themselves at least once a week. Sorry, I'm just summarizing because it's the exact same question in the last part. So explain whether or not you would recommend Sophie or Tobias and Sophie to use the following learning principles to accomplish their goal. If you think they should use the principle, explain how. If you think they should not use the principle, explain why not. And what principles do we have now? We have law of effect, we have negative punishment, and that's it. So I thought that was the third one. So we have law of effect and negative punishment. So you know the drill. You know what we got to do. We have to identify law and effect. Now we have to define law and effect. So what is law of effect? I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that and tell me what you think it is. Alright, so law of effect is the idea that responses that lead to positive effects are repeated, while responses that lead to negative effects are not repeated. So that is the definition of law of effect. So should Tobias and Sophie use the law of effect? Would this principle help them teach their children responsibility and help them teach their children to do their laundry on their own once a week? What do you guys think? Okay, so yes, they should use the principle of law and effect to achieve their goal. If the responses doing the laundry of the teens lead to positive effects, then those responses doing the laundry will be repeated. So for example, if the teens do their laundry, the positive effects may be they're praised by their parents. They're like, oh, you guys are such great children. You're doing your laundry. Amazing. So if they continuously have those positive effects, then the responses will be repeated. They'll be like, well, I got praised the last time I did it by myself, so let me do it again so I can get that same effect. Because I really liked how that made me feel. So let me continue to do my laundry so I can reap those positive effects. So that's it. That is why they should use it. Once again, an example answer would be, law of effect is the idea that responses that lead to positive effects are repeated, while responses that lead to negative effects are not repeated. Oops. So therefore, yes, they should use the principle of law and effect to achieve their goal. If the responses doing the laundry of the teens lead to positive effects, then those responses doing the laundry will be repeated. Alright, so what is negative punishment? So back again, we had the operant conditioning slide, so we defined all of these. So what is negative punishment? I'll give you guys a few seconds to answer that. Okay, so negative punishment is the takeaway or the removal of a desired stimulus. So remember how I said earlier, negative doesn't necessarily mean bad, and positive doesn't necessarily mean good. It's more about the adding and taking away of something. So negative means to take away, positive means to add. So in this case, there's a negative punishment. So that's the removal of a desired stimulus because it's a punishment. So the outcome is going to be undesirable. So the punishment is the removal of a desired stimulus. The desired stimulus. Alright, so should Tobias and Sophie use negative punishment? What do you guys think? No. Tobias and Sophie should not use negative punishment because using it might discourage their teenagers from wanting to do their laundry. It is not the most effective method to train an organism to do something. So remember earlier in the other slide, we had another term that led to an undesired stimulus. So remember, negative punishment helps to help an organism avoid a behavior. So positive punishment, negative punishment, those both help an organism to avoid a behavior. But in this case, we want an organism to do a behavior, so it's not the best method in this case, is to use a punishment. So example answer would be, negative punishment is the removal of a desired stimulus. No, Tobias and Sophie should not use negative punishment because using it might discourage their teenagers from wanting to do their laundry. It is not the most effective method to train an organism to do something. Does everyone understand that last sentence about it not being the most effective method? Because we want to train them to do their laundry and not train them to avoid a behavior. So therefore, it's not the best method. Okay, so we have one more FRQ to do. This is a mini FRQ, and then we are done. So congratulations, guys, on finishing 2 FRQs already. Really just one question, but we answered a lot of different terms. So congratulations on finishing all those so far. If you're watching this on the Fiveable On Demand and you've been answering them on your own as you go, if you got them correct, congratulations. If not, I hope my explanations have helped you so far. And remember, don't be afraid to reach out to the Fiveable team. If you have any specific questions about anything, reach out to us in the AP Psychology team. So yeah, here's the last FRQ, and let's get right into it. Okay, so classical conditioning and operant conditioning are different learning methods. Yes, they are different learning methods. They're not the same thing. Okay, so their similarities are that they both produce the following basic phenomena. Explain the terms in relation to the different types of conditioning and give an example with each explanation. This FRQ is a little bit harder, so you might want to see how I answer this first part, and then you guys can join in. Or if you feel like you know, go ahead and put a comment below. Or if you're watching on demand, Fiveable On Demand, go ahead and write down your answer or think about your answer for each of these parts. Okay, so here are the terms they want us to explain: acquisition, extinction, and discrimination. All right, so what is acquisition in classical conditioning? Because remember, they want us to explain with using both methods. So classical and operant, they both produce the same phenomena. So both operant and conditioning produce an acquisition, extinction, and discrimination, but we want to explain the differences between the two with operant and classical, and also provide an example for each within classical and operant conditioning. Okay, so what is acquisition in classical conditioning? Acquisition is when the neutral stimulus becomes associated with the unconditioned stimulus and creates a response when presented. So remember that first slide, or the first of the 10 slides, the neutral stimulus was a whistle, and the unconditioned stimulus was food, and the response presented was salivation. So example, when conditioning a dog to salivate at the sound of a whistle, acquisition is when the sound of the whistle becomes associated with the receival of food, unconditioned stimulus. Okay, so what is acquisition in operant conditioning? Well, in operant conditioning, acquisition is the strengthening of a reinforced response. So an example would be, if a child is given TV time after completing their homework, acquisition occurs when the child links that doing homework gives them more TV time. So therefore, they correlate the two. So if each time a child does their homework and their parent is like, "Oh, congratulations, you did your homework. Here's 50 minutes to watch whatever TV show you want to watch." If that continuously happens, the child begins to pair doing their homework with more TV time. Therefore, that is the acquisition. They have become associated. The two have become associated. All right, so when does extinction occur in classical conditioning? So when a conditioned stimulus is presented alone without an unconditioned stimulus, the conditioned response will stop. So remember, in that early example, the conditioned stimulus was the whistle. The unconditioned stimulus is the food. So what will happen if this is presented alone without this? Extinction occurs. So example, if the unconditioned stimulus is food and the conditioned stimulus is a whistle, if the whistle is continuously blown without producing the unconditioned stimulus, food, then the conditioned response, salivation, will cease. So basically, if a dog is conditioned to listen to a whistle and know that it's time to eat, and the whistle is continuing, let's just say that the food is gone. So the person just blows the whistle, continuously, days after days, time after time, and there's no food presented with the whistle, with the sound of the whistle, the dog will begin to stop salivating because they're like, I hear the whistle, but there's no food. Like, what is going on? So that behavior just ceases, and then therefore you have extinction. So when does extinction occur in operant conditioning? Extinction occurs when a response is no longer reinforced. So an example of that would be if a child sees being able to watch TV as a positive reinforcer for doing homework, extinction would occur if the child is no longer given TV time after completing their homework. So if the child once associated homework and getting more time to watch TV, if they're not getting more time to watch TV, that association sort of goes away. So therefore, extinction occurs because they don't associate their homework with more TV time. And I think we have one last bullet. What is discrimination in classical conditioning? So discrimination is the ability to distinguish between a conditioned stimulus and other stimulus. So an example, a dog being trained to salivate to the sound of a whistle could differentiate between the conditioned stimulus and another stimulus by the difference in tone and pitch of the whistle. Therefore, they have discriminated against the CS, the conditioned stimulus. So if there's one whistle that has a different tone and different pitch than the other, and another whistle is blown with a different tone and different pitch to the other, the dog will salivate to the whistle that is the exact whistle that he was paired to salivate to, and not a different whistle with a different tone. It has to be the exact same whistle. That is discrimination. So what is discrimination in operant conditioning? Well, in operant conditioning, discrimination is responding only to the discriminative stimulus and not to similar stimulus. So for example, if a dog is trained to jump whenever he hears the word jump, he can tell the difference between this command versus other commands such as sit, stop, stay, or speak. So therefore, they had discriminated against the different commands. Oh, and also, I think this is the last slide. So I know there wasn't a bullet about it, but what do you guys think would happen if generalization occurred? So generalization is basically the opposite of discrimination. So if there was generalization, they sort of don't have a discrimination between two things. They sort of generalize them all together and don't see really a difference between the two. So for example, if this said generalization instead of discrimination, then the dog will salivate at both whistles. Even though both whistles have different tone and different pitch, the dog has generalized the two, so it will salivate at either sound. And for generalization in operant conditioning, the dog may not have discriminated between jump and the other commands. So anytime they hear jump, they may sit, they may stop, speak, because they sort of generalize the terms together. So that's basically it. And congratulations, we finished all the FRQs and all the background information for Unit 4. So thank you guys for joining me today for this stream. If you have any questions, again, don't feel afraid to reach out to the Fiveable team. And I want to say thank you again for all of you for watching the stream. If you're watching on Fiveable Demand, hello, and I hope the stream was helpful. So yeah, just enjoy the rest of your day and rock out this AP exam. Bye, guys.